"Don't hurt me. I'll give you sons," she cried. But the Amish man just sat beside her and listened. On a cold frontier night, a desperate widow runs from the men who claim to own her. She thinks all men are the same, hungry, violent, dangerous. But this man is different, quiet, unshaken. Instead of taking her, he offers her food, warmth, and the one thing she's never been given before: dignity. But mercy comes at a cost. The riders who branded her property will not let go. And when fire lights the sky and chains close around her wrists again, one hidden truth could change the fate of an entire valley water rights buried in her husband's name. In a land ruled by fear and guns, can a gentle man's silence stand against power and greed? Or will kindness be crushed beneath iron hooves? What happens when the law of the West collides with the law of mercy and only one can survive? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now and if this story speaks to you. Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Winter wind cut across the empty fields like a knife as Marisol Tenorio stumbled through. The gathering dusk, her thin shawl offered little protection against the biting cold. Her feet, nearly frozen in worn boots, caught on unseen roots and stones. Behind her lay miles of desperate flight from the cattle boss's men. Ahead, through eyes blurred with exhaustion, she spotted a figure working at a fence line. Terror and hope warred in her chest. The last rays of sunlight caught the man's plain dark clothing and broad-brimmed hat. Different from the cowboys who'd been pursuing her. Still, experience had taught her to fear any man's power over a woman alone. Her legs finally gave out just yards from where he worked. As she crumpled to the frozen ground, the words burst from her cracked lips. "Don't hurt me. I'll give you sons." The man turned, revealing a weathered face lined more with kindness than hardship. He set down his tools with deliberate care, moving slowly as one might approach a frightened horse. "Be at peace," he said, his voice low and steady. "No one will harm you here." Through her fog of fear and exhaustion, Marisol watched him approach. His movements were measured, his empty hands held where she could see them. When he crouched beside her, keeping a respectful distance, she saw genuine concern in his eyes. "I am Ephraim Miller," he said simply. "Can you walk? My sister-in-law is at the house. She'll help tend to you." Marisol tried to stand, but swayed dangerously. Without touching her, Ephraim positioned himself to support her if she fell. "Lean on my arm if you need to," he offered. "The house isn't far." The short walk to the farmhouse seemed to take hours. Each step sent pain through Marisol's frozen feet. The wind whipped at her shawl, but Ephraim's solid presence beside her blocked the worst of it. As they approached the house, warm lamplight spilled from the windows. The door opened before they reached it, and a woman's figure appeared in the golden light. "Ephraim," she called out, worry clear in her voice. "Anna, this lady needs our help," Ephraim replied. "She's nearly frozen." Anna Miller's face showed momentary surprise, but she quickly stepped aside to let them enter. The kitchen's warmth wrapped around Marisol like a blanket. A pot bubbled on the wood stove, filling the air with the rich smell of beef broth. "Sit here by the stove," Anna directed, pulling out a sturdy chair. Her practical efficiency reminded Marisol of her own mother, bringing an unexpected ache to her heart. Marisol sank into the chair, her body trembling uncontrollably now that it began to thaw. She flinched when Anna approached with a wool blanket, earning a look of understanding from the older woman. "You're safe here," Anna said softly. Setting the blanket within Marisol's reach instead of draping it over her shoulders, Ephraim took a seat at the far end of the table, giving her space while staying visible. His presence was like an anchor, solid and steady without being threatening. Anna busied herself at the stove, soon returning with a cup of steaming broth. The warm cup in her hands helped stop their shaking. Marisol took a careful sip, then another. As warmth spread through her body, words began to spill out haltingly. She told them of her late husband, an Apache scout killed in the line of duty, of the cattle boss who'd tried to claim her like property, of her desperate flight through the winter night. Ephraim listened without interruption, his face grave but kind. When she finished, he bowed his head briefly. Lord, he prayed quietly, protect this child of yours who seeks refuge. Grant her peace beneath this roof. The simple prayer brought unexpected tears to Marisol's eyes. She blinked them away, focusing on finishing her broth while Anna prepared a proper meal. Soon, all three sat at the table, sharing bread, stew, and stit, and a comfortable silence broken only by the howling wind outside. As the evening deepened, Ephraim rose and began gathering clean straw and blankets. With quiet efficiency, he prepared a bed near the warmth of the stove. "You'll sleep here tonight," he said. "No one will disturb you." Marisol watched him work, still hardly daring to believe in such kindness. When he finished, she whispered, "Thank you." The words seemed inadequate for the gift of safety they had given her. Ephraim nodded simply, then took his leave. Anna stayed long enough to ensure Marisol had everything she needed before retiring to her own room. Left alone in the lamplit kitchen, Marisol sank into the makeshift bed, letting its surprising comfort embrace her. The wind continued its assault outside, but here, within these walls, she had found unexpected sanctuary. Dawn painted the eastern sky in gentle strokes of pink and gold. The first rooster's crow split the morning silence, soon joined by others in a chorus that echoed across the Miller farmstead. Inside the warm kitchen, Marisol stirred on her straw bed, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar surroundings. The scent of fresh coffee and wood smoke drifted through the air as Anna moved quietly about the kitchen. She noticed Marisol's eyes open and offered a gentle smile. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" Marisol nodded, sitting up slowly. Her muscles ached from yesterday's long flight, but the night's rest had done her good. Through the window, she watched Ephraim's tall figure moving between the barn and the chicken coop. Going about his morning chores, Anna approached with a bundle of clothing in her arms. These might be a bit large, but they're clean and warm. She set them beside Marisol. "The washing room is through that door, if you'd like to freshen up." The dress Anna provided was simple but well made, its dark blue fabric soft from many washings. Marisol changed quickly, grateful to shed her dust-covered clothes. When she returned to the kitchen, the table was set for breakfast, steam rising from bowls of hot porridge. Ephraim came in from his chores, stamping snow from his boots. He nodded a quiet good morning before taking his seat. After a brief prayer of thanks, they began to eat. The warm food and gentle acceptance loosened something in Marisol's chest. Words she'd held back began to spill forth. "After my husband died," she said softly, "the cattle boss claimed I was part of the property he'd bought. Said the water rights my husband held came with everything else, including me." Her hands trembled around her coffee cup. "He treated me like a possession, not a person." Ephraim's face grew stern, though his voice remained gentle. "No man owns another here," he said firmly. "You are free to stay as long as you need." Hope flickered in Marisol's heart at his words, but fate had other plans. The thunder of approaching hooves shattered the morning peace. "They've found me," Marisol whispered, her face draining of color. Through the window, they could see dust rising from half a dozen riders approaching the farm. Ephraim rose calmly from the table, reaching for his well-worn Bible on the shelf. "Stay inside," he told the women, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. He stepped out onto the porch just as the riders reined in their horses. Their leader, a man with cold eyes and a week's worth of stubble, spat into the dust. "Miller," he growled, "you're harboring stolen property. Hand over the Mexican woman. Ephraim stood straight, his Bible held firmly in one hand. She is not. Property, he replied, his quiet voice carrying across the yard. She is a free woman, and she has claimed sanctuary here. The leader's face darkened. That water rights contract makes her the boss's property, same as any other asset. You'd best step aside. I have here, Ephraim said, pulling a folded paper. From his Bible, the original deed to this land, signed before your boss ever set foot in this territory. These boundaries are legally recorded, and anyone seeking shelter within them is under my protection. The riders shifted uneasily in their saddles. Their leader glared at the document, then at Ephraim's unwavering stance. The boss won't take kindly to this, Miller. Your fancy paper won't stop bullets. Perhaps not, Ephraim agreed calmly. But the law will have something to say about 6 armed men attacking a peaceful farm. Is that a risk you're willing to take? After a tense moment, the leader spat again and jerked his reins. This ain't over, Miller. Tell that woman she'd best watch her step. The riders wheeled their horses around, kicking up clouds of dust as they galloped away. Anna appeared in the doorway as the sound of hooves faded. They'll be back, she whispered, her face tight with worry. You know they will. Ephraim nodded, gravely, tucking the deed back into his Bible. The morning sun cast long shadows across the farmyard as he walked to the barn, his shoulders heavy with the weight of what was to come. That evening, after the chores were done and supper was cleared, away Ephraim knelt beside his bed. The lamplight cast his shadow on the wall as he bowed his head in prayer. Lord, he whispered, grant me the strength to protect those you have sent to my door. Show me how to stand firm without raising my hand in violence. Give me the wisdom to find a path through this valley of shadows. The wind whispered around the corners of the house, carrying the first hints of another storm. In the quiet of his room, Ephraim continued his prayer. Seeking guidance for the trials ahead, the mid-morning sun cast long shadows across the farmyard when Sheriff Brooks's horse appeared on the horizon. His approach was unhurried, giving the chickens plenty of time to scatter from his path as he guided his mount toward the hitching post. Ephraim set down his wood-splitting axe and wiped his brow. Morning, Sheriff. Nathaniel Brooks dismounted with a grunt, his weathered face creased with concern. Ephraim, we need to talk. He glanced toward the house where Marisol could be seen helping Anna hang laundry. Word spreading about your guest. They walked to the shade of the barn, away from eager ears. The sheriff hooked his thumbs in his belt. Those cattle hands rode into town last night, stirring up trouble at the saloon. Boss Sloan's got influence across 3 counties. Ephraim, this could spark something ugly. The Lord calls us to shelter those in need, Ephraim said quietly. Scripture's one thing, reality's another. The sheriff kicked at a clump of dirt. Look, I respect your ways, but sometimes the peaceful path means stepping aside. That woman should move on, quiet-like, before this gets worse. Soft gasp made both men turn. Marisol stood in the barn doorway, a basket of eggs clutched to her chest. Her face had gone pale, eyes wide with fear and hurt. Her voice cracked. I have nowhere else. The boss's men will find me anywhere I go. My husband's people are scattered, my family in Mexico, long dead. The basket trembled in her hands. I hoped. Ephraim stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. You hoped right, Marisol. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. He turned to the sheriff. Matthew 25, verse 35. The word is clear on this, Nathaniel. The sheriff sighed heavily. Your faith gets you killed. One day, Miller. Perhaps, but it will not be today. Ephraim took the egg basket from Marisol's shaking hands. You are welcome here. That has not changed. The sheriff mounted up, shaking his head. I'll do what I can to keep the peace, but you're playing with fire. He touched his hat brim and rode away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. As evening approached, the kitchen filled with warm light and familiar sounds. Anna stood at the wooden table, showing Marisol how to roll out dough for noodles. The children, Sarah and John, watched eagerly, knowing their favorite dish was in the making. Like this? Marisol asked, carefully copying Anna's movements. Just so, Anna nodded approvingly. Now fold it over, just once. There you have it. The noodles went into the bubbling pot, while Sarah set the table and John fed kindling into the stove. The routine of it all seemed to ease some of the day's tension from Marisol's shoulders as they worked. She began to hum softly, an old melody that seemed to float on the lamplight. The children paused in their tasks, drawn by the gentle tune. What song is that? Sarah asked, eyes bright with curiosity. A lullaby my mother sang, Marisol explained. Would you like to hear it? The children nodded eagerly, and even Anna stopped her stirring to listen as Marisol's clear voice filled the kitchen with Spanish words of comfort and sleep. The song spoke of angels watching over little ones, of peaceful dreams and morning light. When the last note faded, there were tears in Anna's eyes. That was beautiful, she whispered. We haven't had music in this house since, she trailed off. But everyone knew she meant since Ephraim's wife had passed. Ephraim himself stood in the doorway, having come in from the evening chores. His face was soft in the lamplight, touched by something between grief and grace. Supper's ready, Anna said quickly, wiping her eyes with her apron. Sarah, help me with these bowls. They gathered around the table, steam rising from bowls of soup and fresh noodles. After grace was said, they passed the bread and butter. Speaking softly of small things, tomorrow's weather, the new calf in the barn, John's progress with his letters. For a moment, it felt like family, not the one they had lost, but something new and tender. Like spring grass pushing through melting snow. But Ephraim's gaze kept drifting to the window, where darkness pressed against the glass. The sheriff's warning echoed in his mind. This piece was as fragile as a soap bubble, shimmering with borrowed light. Tomorrow would bring its own trials, but for now, he let the warmth of the kitchen and the sound of gentle laughter wash over him like a blessing. Snow fell in thick curtains for days, blanketing Ephraim Miller's farmstead in hushed white. The world seemed to pause, giving Marisol time to learn the rhythms of her new sanctuary. Each morning, she followed Ephraim to the barn, her borrowed boots crunching fresh powder. Like this, he demonstrated, his strong hands showing her how to grasp and pull in steady rhythm. The cow shifted, but Ephraim's gentle murmurs kept her calm. The trick is being firm but kind. Marisol's first attempts sent milk spraying sideways, making her cheeks burn with embarrassment. But Ephraim never laughed, only nodded encouragement until she found the right touch. Soon, the ping of milk hitting the pail became as familiar as her own heartbeat out by the fence line. Where winter wind whistled through the posts, Ephraim taught her to splice broken wire. His calloused fingers guided hers as they twisted the sharp strands together. Keep your thumb here, he said, and wrap it tight around itself. The metal bit cold against her skin, but pride warmed her when the repair held strong. Inside the farmhouse, Anna opened her quilting chest, spreading bright squares of fabric across the kitchen table. Each pattern tells a story, she explained, touching a star-shaped design. This one's called North Star. It guided many to freedom. Marisol traced the stitches with wonder. My people weave stories too, she said softly. Different patterns, same heart. When John complained of chilblains from the bitter cold, Marisol gathered pine needles and witch hazel from the storage cellar. My grandmother's remedy, she explained, brewing a poultice at the cook stove. Anna watched with interest as Marisol wrapped the boy's red fingers. By evening, John flexed his hands with relief. "It doesn't hurt anymore," he declared. Anna touched Marisol's arm. "You must show me how to make that," she said. "We could help many during these hard winters." As darkness fell early, they gathered by the hearth. Lamplight danced on the walls while Sarah practiced her letters and John whittled a small horse. From pine, the crack and pop of burning logs filled comfortable silences. "My Thomas used to dream of land near here," Marisol said one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. All eyes turned to her. She rarely spoke of her late husband. Was Apache, a scout for the cavalry. Said this creek had the sweetest water he'd ever tasted. Her fingers worked her shawl's fringe. He wanted to farm here, raise horses. Said the spirits walked peaceful in these hills. Ephraim sat very still, Bible open but forgotten in his lap. His eyes met Marisol's across the firelight. "The Lord works in ways we cannot see," he said quietly. "Perhaps he guided you home, after all." A sharp knock at the door shattered the moment. 3 sets of boots stamped snow on the porch, the Yoder family from 2 farms over. Their faces were pinched with concern as they stepped inside. "Evening, Ephraim," Jacob Yoder said, clutching his hat. Word spreading about those riders who came by. Folk are worried about trouble following them back. His wife Rebecca nodded. "That cattle boss has friends in high places. They say he burns out those who cross him." "Marisol is under our protection," Ephraim stated firmly. "The Lord commands us to shelter those in need." Jacob shifted uncomfortably. "It's not just about us anymore. What if he turns his men loose on all the plain folk in the valley? Our children could suffer. I have seen his cruelty." Marisol spoke up, her voice trembling but clear. "I would not bring it to your door." She turned to Ephraim. Perhaps I should go." "No." Ephraim's response was immediate, brooking no argument. "This is God's land, not Sloane's. We will not bow to evil out of fear." The Yoders exchanged uneasy glances. "Think on it, brother," Jacob said as they prepared to leave. "Sometimes wisdom means choosing your battles." After they departed, silence hung heavy as morning frost. Marisol stood by the window, arms wrapped tight around herself. "They are right to worry," she whispered. "I bring danger to your home, to your children." "You bring truth and healing," Ephraim countered, moving to stand beside her. "Those are worth defending." His voice grew stronger, surer. "Stay, please." In the corner, Anna resumed her quilting, needle flashing in the firelight. The children returned to their quiet activities. Outside, snow continued to fall, but inside, conviction burned warm as banked coals. Keeping doubts chill at bay, the morning sun cast long shadows across the snow-covered farmland as Ephraim and Marisol made their way toward the creek. Their boots crunched through the crusty surface, breaking trail through drifts that had accumulated over the past weeks. Ephraim carried a shovel over one shoulder, while Marisol held a bucket of tools needed to repair the frozen irrigation sluice. "The spring thaw will come before we know it," Ephraim explained, his breath forming clouds in the crisp air. "Best to have the water flowing proper when it does." They reached the creek bank, where ice rimmed the sluggish water. The wooden sluice gate had warped in the cold, creating gaps where precious water would leak come planting time. Ephraim tested the mechanism, frowning at its stubborn resistance. "We'll need to dig out this frozen mud first," he said, stabbing his shovel into the hard earth. "Then we can reset the frame, true." Marisol knelt beside him, using a small trowel to clear ice from the wooden slats. Her fingers grew numb despite her wool mittens, but she worked steadily. The familiar sound of running water beneath the ice stirred memories she'd tried to forget. "Thomas understood water," she said softly. almost to herself. He used to say it was like blood in the earth's veins. Her trowel scraped against frozen mud. Before he died, he carried papers from the army. Something about water rights. She shook her head. I never understood their importance. He tried to explain, but Ephraim's shovel paused mid-strike. Papers from the army itself. Yes, he was so careful with them. Marisol's eyes grew distant. Said they would protect our future. But then the fever took him, and everything happened so fast. She swallowed hard. The cattle boss's men came. Before we could even hold a proper burial, Ephraim resumed digging, but his movements were thoughtful. These papers, did they survive? I grabbed what I could when I fled. My saddlebag. Her voice trailed off as understanding dawned. It's still in your barn loft, wrapped in Thomas's old shirt. They worked in silence for several minutes. The only sounds being metal striking frozen earth and the muffled gurgle of the creek. Ephraim's mind churned with possibilities. If those papers were what he suspected, official water rights certificates, they could change everything. The sun climbed higher as they finished repairs to the sluice gate. Their fingers were stiff with cold despite the exertion. Ephraim tested the mechanism one final time, satisfied when it moved smoothly. Time to warm up, he said, gathering their tools. Anna will have coffee on the stove. Back at the farmhouse, they stamped snow from their boots and hung their frozen outer garments by the cook stove. Anna poured steaming coffee into tin cups, adding an extra splash of cream to Marisol's. The warmth slowly returned to their hands and feet as they sat in comfortable silence. That evening, after the household had gone to bed, Ephraim lit a lantern and made his way to the barn. The structure creaked in the night wind as he climbed to the loft, his boots quiet on the wooden rungs. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the roof boards, casting strange shadows among the stored hay bales. He found Marisol's saddlebag tucked beneath some old horse blankets. It was a simple thing, worn leather, scratched and faded from hard use. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened the flap. Remembering Marisol's words about her husband's papers, wrapped carefully in a faded cavalry shirt, he found a packet of documents. The army seal was still clear on yellowed paper, along with official stamps and signatures. Ephraim's eyes widened as he read by lantern light. The certificate granted Thomas Tenorio in recognition of his service as an Army scout, exclusive. Rights to draw water from Cedar Creek and its tributaries. The date on the document preceded any of the cattle. Boss's claims to the valley by several years. Ephraim sat back on his heels, stunned by the implications. These papers meant Marisol, not Sloan or his powerful friends, legally controlled the valley's most precious resource. Every ranch, every farm, even the town itself depended on this. Water, no wonder Thomas had guarded these papers so carefully. No wonder the cattle boss had moved so quickly after his death, trying to secure Marisol before she understood what she possessed. Ephraim carefully rewrapped the documents, his resolve hardening like steel in a forge. His truth would need protecting. Not just the papers themselves, but the brave woman who carried them without. Knowing their worth, he returned the saddlebag to its hiding place and descended from the loft. The barn's shadows felt different now, charged with the weight of discovery. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, Ephraim had a clear purpose. Guard these papers and their rightful owner until justice could prevail. Dawn painted the eastern sky in soft pinks and golds as Ephraim hitched the horses to the wagon. His breath formed clouds in the frigid morning air while he checked each buckle and strap with practiced care. The fresh snow from yesterday lay untouched across the farmyard. A pristine blanket waiting to be broken, Anna emerged from the house. First, carrying a basket of eggs to trade at the mercantile. She wore her best black bonnet, tied securely against the winter wind. Marisol followed moments later, wrapped in one of Anna's spare shawls, her dark eyes uncertain as she approached the wagon. "The snow makes everything look new," Marisol said. softly touching the wagon's wooden side. "That it does," Ephraim agreed, offering his hand to help her up onto the bench seat. The wagon's springs creaked as they settled, and snow crunched beneath the iron-rimmed wheels as they started down the lane. The journey to town took nearly an hour, the horses moving steadily through the crystalline morning. A tease made a rhythmic pattern, clop, pause, clop, as they navigated the snow-covered road. Marisol sat between Anna and Ephraim, their shared warmth a buffer against the cold. As they approached the town's main street, activity was already bustling despite the early hour. Shopkeepers swept their boardwalks, and smoke rose from chimneys in straight columns against the pale sky. The wagon drew curious glances as it passed, or rather, its occupants did. "Look there," one woman whispered to another, not quite quietly enough. The Amish farmer brought that Mexican woman to town. Marisol's shoulders tensed, but Anna patted her hand. "Pay them no mind," she murmured. "They'll learn better soon enough." Ephraim pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the mercantile. Inside, the store smelled of coffee beans, leather, and wood smoke. While Ephraim discussed seed prices with Mr. Henderson, the shopkeeper, Anna guided Marisol toward the fabric section. As they examined calico prints, Anna noticed Mrs. Carter, the schoolteacher, selecting buttons nearby. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter," Anna said, moving closer. Her voice dropped low as she added, "I wonder if you might be interested in some news about water rights in the valley." The schoolteacher's eyes widened slightly as Anna shared carefully chosen details about the certificate. As an educated woman who often served as the town's unofficial record keeper, Mrs. Carter would understand the significance and know how to spread the word prudently. Their next stop was the white-painted church at the end of the street. Sunday. Service would begin soon, and Marisol hesitated at the bottom of the steps. "Perhaps I should wait with the wagon," she suggested, but Ephraim shook his head. "The Lord's house welcomes all," he said firmly. Inside, Marisol followed Anna to the women's section, conscious of every creak of the wooden floors beneath her feet. She sat stiffly on the hard pew, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. But when Pastor Roberts made his way down the aisle before the service, he stopped to greet her with genuine warmth. "Welcome, Miss Tenorio," he said, inclining his head. "We're glad to have you join us this morning." The tension in Marisol's shoulders eased slightly at his kind tone. Throughout the service, she found herself drawn into the familiar rhythms of worship. Even if some of the hymns were different from those, she knew. Evening found them back at the farmhouse, gathered around the cook stove while Anna served hot cider. The day's interactions in town had left Marisol quiet and thoughtful. "You know," Anna said, setting down her cup, "we should organize a quilting bee. The women gather regularly to work on quilts together. It's a fine way to become part of the community." Marisol's fingers worried at the edge of her shawl. I'm not sure they would want me there." "Nonsense," Anna replied. "You have clever hands, and we always welcome help with the quilting. Besides, once they know you, they'll see what we see." Still, Marisol hesitated. The memory of whispered words and sideways glances in town was fresh in her mind. What if she fell silent as Ephraim's hand came to rest on her shoulder, warm and steady. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "building trust is like stitching a quilt. It happens one piece at a time, but in the end, something beautiful is created." The simple wisdom of his words settled over them like a comfortable blanket. Marisol looked up at him, finding strength in his calm certainty. Finally, she nodded. "Double quotes, very well," she said. "I will try." Anna smiled, already planning the details. Outside, snow began falling again, adding fresh layers to the day's tracks and transforming the familiar landscape into something new, just as their small family was being transformed. One careful step at a time, the morning sun streamed through. Anna's windows as women arrived for the quilting bee, their voices filling the usually quiet farmhouse. Quilting frames had been set up in the main room, with colorful fabric squares laid out in neat piles. The air smelled of fresh-baked bread and coffee, welcoming scents that Anna hoped would ease the tensions she knew might arise. Marisol stood near the kitchen stove, her fingers nervously smoothing her apron. She had helped Anna prepare all morning. But now that the local women were arriving, she felt unsure of her place. Mrs. Henderson from the mercantile barely glanced her way, while Mrs. Carter, the schoolteacher, offered a cautious nod. "Let's begin with a 9-patch pattern," Anna announced, drawing everyone to the largest frame. The women settled onto chairs and benches, their needles glinting in the sunlight. Marisol noticed how they left an empty space between themselves. And where she sat, the quiet clicking of needles filled the air, accompanied by soft conversation about children and weather. Marisol focused on her stitches, grateful that her mother had taught her to sew with tiny, even points. She could feel curious eyes watching her work, evaluating her skill. Little Tommy Carter, who'd come along with his mother, played quietly, with wooden blocks near the stove. The morning passed slowly, with Marisol working in silence while the other women chatted among themselves. The exclusion was subtle, but clear, like a fence built of quiet looks and turned shoulders. Suddenly, a sharp cry split the air. Tommy had reached up and touched the hot stove surface, his small hand meeting the burning iron. The child's wails filled the room as his mother rushed to him. Without hesitation, Marisol sprang up. "Please," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I can help." She hurried to her bag in the corner, pulling out a small pouch of dried herbs. Working quickly, she mixed the herbs with cool water from the pump, creating a soothing paste. The other women watched, their sewing forgotten, as she gently approached the crying child. "May I?" she asked Mrs. Carter softly. The school teacher nodded, desperation overcoming any hesitation. Marisol knelt beside Tommy, speaking in gentle tones as she applied the cooling poultice to his reddened palm. "This is what my grandmother used," she explained, wrapping the hand carefully. "The herbs will take away the sting and help prevent blisters." Tommy's cries softened to hiccups as the pain eased. The women gathered closer, their faces showing surprise and interest as Marisol explained the simple remedy. "What kind of herbs are those?" Mrs. Henderson asked, her earlier coldness forgotten in her curiosity. "Aloe and plantain leaf mixed with a bit of lavender," Marisol answered. "They grow wild in the valley. I could show you where to find them." The tension in the room had shifted. The women began asking questions about other remedies, and Marisol shared what she knew of healing plants passed down through generations of her family. As they returned to their quilting, the empty space around her gradually filled in the warmth of this new acceptance. Marisol began to hum softly as she sewed. The melody, learned from her Apache husband's people and mixed with Spanish words, filled the quiet room. It was a song of hope and healing, of rain bringing life to dry places. Ephraim, passing by the doorway with arms full of firewood, stopped to listen. The sight of Marisol singing as she worked, her dark head bent close to Mrs. Carter's fair one over the quilt, stirred something deep in his heart. He hadn't heard music in his home since his wife's passing, and the sweet notes seemed too warm. The house like sunshine as afternoon stretched toward evening. Anna brought out a large pot of rabbit stew she had prepared. The savory smell drew everyone to the kitchen, where they gathered around the long table. Marisol helped serve, ladling the hot stew into bowls while the women passed around fresh bread. "This stew has a flavor I don't recognize," Mrs. Henderson commented, taking a second helping. "It's wonderful." Marisol added some of her herbs, Anna explained, smiling at her friend. "She has quite a gift with seasonings." The conversation flowed more easily now, including Marisol naturally as they discussed recipes and remedies. Though some women still watched her with careful eyes, the earlier wall of silence had crumbled. When Mrs. Carter asked if Marisol would show her where to find the healing herbs, several others nodded in interest as they ate together in the lamp-lit kitchen. Marisol felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the stew. For the first time since arriving at the Miller farm, she wasn't just a stranger being sheltered. She was a person with gifts to share, knowledge to offer. She belonged, if only at the edges of this community, and that belonging felt as warm and real as the quilt taking shape under their combined hands. The spring morning dawned clear and bright, with sunlight dancing across the freshly tilled soil. Ephraim guided his team of horses across the field, the plow cutting clean furrows through earth softened by melting snow. Marisol walked behind him, dropping wheat seeds into the rich dirt with practiced care. My father always said to plant when the oak leaves are the size of mouse ears, Ephraim shared, pausing to wipe his brow. The morning sun was warm on his face. Marisol glanced at the trees lining the creek. My people watched for when the wild roses first bloomed. She smiled, adding, though perhaps your father's way is more reliable than chasing flowers. Ephraim chuckled, surprising himself. It had been so long since laughter came easily. Mice ears or roses, seems the good Lord gives us many ways to read his timing. They worked steadily through the morning, falling into a comfortable rhythm. The horses' hooves made soft thuds against the earth, while meadowlarks sang from nearby fence posts. When Marisol began humming one of her Spanish hymns, Ephraim found himself nodding along to the gentle melody. You have a way with the seeds, he observed, watching her sure movements. They seem to know your touch. Seeds are like people, she replied, her dark eyes warming. They grow best when handled with care and hope. The simple wisdom of her words touched something in Ephraim's heart. He found himself sharing stories of past harvests, of droughts weathered and bounties celebrated. Marisol listened intently, offering tales of her own family's farming ways. Their laughter mingled with the spring breeze, easier with each passing hour. As the sun reached its peak, Anna called them in for the midday meal. Her capable hands had been busy preparing for the evening's gathering, and savory smells wafted. From the kitchen, Marisol hurried to help, while Ephraim tended to the horses. The afternoon passed swiftly, and as dusk approached, neighbors began arriving for supper. The Hendersons came first, then the Carters and Wilsons. Anna had set the long table with her best cloth, and lantern light made the simple farmhouse glow with welcome. Marisol sat quietly at first, her hands folded in her lap. The conversation flowed around her like creek water around a stone, until Mrs. Carter asked about her late husband's work with the army. Drawing a deep breath, Marisol lifted her chin. John was an Apache scout, she began, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. He guided soldiers through territories others feared to enter. But his real strength was in making peace, not war. The table grew silent, listening as she described how her husband had once prevented bloodshed by convincing both sides to share water rights during a drought. He believed in building bridges, she finished softly. He died trying to protect those who could not protect themselves. Ephraim cleared his throat, drawing all eyes to him. Scripture tells us that in Christ there is neither Jew nor Greek, neither bond nor free. His steady gaze met each person around the table. We are all God's children, called to be one family. Mrs. Henderson nodded slowly. The good book also says to welcome the stranger, for in doing so, some have entertained angels unawares. Laughter broke out as Mr. Wilson added, though I reckon most angels don't know how to make herb poultices quite as well as Marisol here. The tension eased, and soon the room filled with warm conversation and the clinking of spoons against bowls. Marisol's cheeks flushed with pleasure as several women praised her contributions to the meal seasonings, After the dishes were cleared and the neighbors began gathering their things, Ephraim touched Marisol's elbow lightly. "Would you step out for a moment? The evening air is fine." They walked to the porch, where the first stars were beginning to appear in the deepening blue sky. Crickets chirped softly in the grass, and somewhere in the distance, a whip-poor-will called. Ephraim stood quietly for a moment, his hands resting on the porch rail. "I want you to know something," he said finally, his voice gentle but sure. "When you're near, there's a peace in my heart I haven't felt since Sarah passed. It's like," he paused, searching for words, "like the quiet after a spring rain, when everything feels fresh and full of promise." Marisol lowered her eyes, but Ephraim could see the smile that curved her lips. It was small and shy, like the first crocus pushing through snow, but it held all the warmth of the spring sun they had worked under that day. Thunder rumbled in the distance as dark clouds rolled across the evening sky. Ephraim stood at his bedroom window, watching the weather turn. The day's earlier peace felt like a distant memory now. Something in the air felt wrong, heavy with more than just the coming storm. A flash of movement caught his eye, riders approaching through the gloom, their horses' hooves muffled by the soft spring earth. Before he could shout a warning, flames erupted against the barn's wooden walls. Fire spread rapidly up the dry timber, painting the night sky in terrible orange light. "Fire!" Ephraim's voice boomed across the farmyard. He burst from the house, heart pounding. The cattle boss's men had surrounded the barn, their faces masked by bandanas. Smoke billowed thick and black as hay bales caught. Inside, horses screamed in terror. Anna appeared at the door, gathering her children close. "Get to the root cellar," she commanded them, her voice steady despite her fear. The little ones scurried to safety as she ran to help. Ephraim fought his way through the smoke to the barn doors. Heat seared his lungs as he threw them open. The horses reared and bucked in their stalls, wild-eyed with panic. One by one, he freed them, dodging hooves and burning debris. His dairy cow bellowed in distress until he cut her loose too. Through the chaos, a scream pierced the night. Caim's blood ran cold as he recognized Marisol's voice. He stumbled out of the barn, coughing and half-blind from smoke. 2 riders had Marisol between them, dragging her toward their horses. She fought like a wildcat, kicking and twisting, but they were too strong. Her dark hair flew wild as she struggled. "Let her go!" Ephraim charged forward, but another rider cut him off. A punch to his jaw sent him sprawling in the mud. By the time he scrambled up, they were already galloping away, Marisol's cries fading into the darkness. The barn's roof collapsed with a tremendous crash, sending sparks spiraling into the sky like angry fireflies. Ephraim stood helpless, watching the flames devour years of hard work. But the burning building was nothing compared to the ache in his chest at Marisol's capture. When the fire finally died down, leaving only smoking ruins, Ephraim knelt in the ashes. Soot streaked his face and clothes. His hands shook as he picked up a charred piece of timber. The sweet smell of burnt hay mixed with the bitter stench of destruction. Anna approached quietly, laying a gentle hand on his shoulder. "We should pray," she whispered. Ephraim's jaw clenched. The peaceful teachings he'd followed all his life warred with the desperate need to rescue Marisol. He could still hear her screams echoing in his mind. "Prayer feels hollow now, Anna," he said hoarsely. "While she suffers at their hands, how can I just kneel and wait?" "The Lord's ways are not always clear to us," Anna replied, though her own voice wavered with doubt. "But violence only breeds more violence." Ephraim stared at his soot-blackened hands. They were farmers' hands, meant for growing things, not fighting. Yet now they itched for action, for justice. The thought of Marisol in the cattle boss's power aided him like acid. Thunder cracked overhead, and the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. Steam rose where the water hit hot ashes. Ephraim remained kneeling, letting the rain soak him through. Each drop seemed to mock his helplessness. "I promised her she'd be safe here," he said, his words choked with despair. "I promised no man would own her again." Anna squeezed his shoulder. "Then we must find another way. One that doesn't require us to become what we hate." But Ephraim barely heard her. His mind was filled with images of Marisol, her gentle smile as she worked beside him in the fields, her quiet strength as she faced down prejudice, the trust in her eyes when she looked at him. How could he face himself if he abandoned her? Now, the rain fell harder, turning the farmyard to mud. In the distance, lightning illuminated the angry clouds. Ephraim's heart felt as dark as the storm-racked sky. Torn between his peaceful beliefs and the raw need to protect what he loved, he remained there in the mud and ashes, his sister-in-law's presence a silent comfort as despair clawed at his soul. The night stretched endless before him, each moment an agony of indecision. Somewhere out there, Marisol waited. But the path to her rescue remained shrouded in darkness. Like the storm-hidden stars above, through the endless night, Ephraim's boots crunched over charred timber as he paced the smoking ruins. His deep voice carried on the wind as he prayed. Aloud, wrestling with his conscience, like Jacob with the angel. "Lord, show me the path of righteousness," he pleaded, his words rough with exhaustion. "How can I keep your peace while evil men prosper? How can I stay true to your ways, yet protect those in my care?" The stars wheeled overhead, offering no answer. Dawn found him slumped against a fence post, his clothes still damp from the night's rain. As pink light touched the eastern sky, clarity slowly settled over him like morning dew. There had to be a way to fight without becoming what he despised. Inside the house, Anna handed him strong coffee. "You look decided," she said quietly. "I am," Ephraim replied, straightening his shoulders. "I'm riding to town. There are good people there who might help us find a better way." He saddled his horse with care, checking each buckle twice. The familiar motions steadied his hands. Before mounting, he pressed his forehead against the horse's warm neck, drawing strength from the animal's solid presence. The ride into town took an hour, giving him time to order his thoughts. Spring mud sucked at his horse's hooves, but the morning air was crisp and clean after the storm. As he approached the town's outer buildings, he spotted Reverend Matthews sweeping his church steps. The preacher looked up at the sound of hoofbeats. One glance at Ephraim's face told him something was gravely wrong. "Brother Miller, what's happened?" Ephraim dismounted, his boots hitting the packed earth with a tired thud. In low tones, he related the night's events. The preacher's face darkened with each word. "Come with me," Reverend Matthews said when Ephraim finished. "Miss Wilson at the schoolhouse needs to hear this too. And Samuel the blacksmith, he's no friend to the cattle boss." They found Sarah Wilson already at her desk, preparing lessons. The young schoolteacher's eyes widened at their grim faces. Samuel the blacksmith joined them minutes later, his leather apron still on, leaving smudges of soot on the schoolhouse desk. "It's not just about Marisol anymore," Ephraim explained, his voice steady despite his fatigue. "This is about right and wrong, about whether we'll let one man's greed poison our whole community." The others nodded soberly. They knew the cattle boss's reputation for taking what he wanted, regardless of law or decency. But before they could begin planning, a shadow darkened the schoolhouse door. 3 Apache men stood in the entrance, their faces weathered by sun and wind. The eldest stepped forward, speaking in careful English. "We seek our sister's daughter," he said, "Marisol Tenorio. We have followed her trail here." Ephraim's heart jumped. "You're Marisol's kin." The man nodded. "I am Running Fox, her mother's brother. These are my sons. We heard of trouble and came to help." Ephraim hesitated only a moment. His Amish upbringing had taught him to be wary of outsiders, but it had also taught him to recognize God's hand in apparent coincidence. He stood and extended his hand. "Your timing is providence itself," he said. "We need all the help we can get." The next hour was spent in careful discussion. Running Fox and his sons knew the territory better than anyone. The schoolteacher offered her knowledge of local law. Samuel suggested ways to block the cattle boss's usual tactics of intimidation. The preacher spoke of rallying community support. "Violence will only justify his actions," Ephraim insisted. "We must use truth as our weapon. Truth has teeth." Running Fox agreed, surprising them with the wisdom in his words, especially when many voices speak it together. As evening approached, Ephraim returned home to prepare for what was coming. In his bedroom, he carefully unfolded Marisol's water right certificate. The official seal gleamed in the lamplight. As he read each word again, committing them to memory. This simple paper could change everything if they used it wisely. He tucked the document securely into his coat pocket, feeling its weight against his heart. Tomorrow would test his faith in ways he'd never imagined. But looking out his window at the burnt barn, he knew he'd found his answer. Sometimes standing for peace meant standing against injustice. Not with fists or guns, but with truth and unity. The sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in colors of hope. In town, his allies were spreading the word, gathering support. On the outskirts, Marisol's Apache kin were watching the cattle boss's movements. And here, in his quiet room, Ephraim offered one final prayer, not for courage or strength, but for wisdom to find justice without losing his soul. Dawn painted the eastern sky in gentle strokes of pink and gold as the unlikely group gathered at the edge of town. Ephraim sat tall in his saddle, his plain black hat marking him distinct from the others. Running Fox and his sons moved like shadows among the horses, checking gear with practiced hands. The morning air carried the scent of sage and promises. Of spring, they set out as the sun crested the horizon, a slow and purposeful procession. The Apache scouts led the way, their keen eyes reading the land like an open book. Ephraim watched in quiet admiration as they found signs invisible to his farmer's gaze. A bent blade of grass here, a displaced stone there. Each mark told a story of who had passed and when. The morning stretched before them as they wound through arroyos, deep channels carved by ancient waters. Dust rose in small clouds beneath their horses' hooves, and the desert slowly came alive around them. A hawk circled overhead, its cry echoing against the canyon walls. When the sun reached its highest point, Running Fox raised his hand, signaling a stop near a clear stream. The horses drank gratefully while the men settled in the shade of a cottonwood tree. Ephraim reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a bundle wrapped in clean cloth. "My sister-in-law's bread," he offered, breaking the loaf into shares. "Made fresh yesterday morning." Running Fox's youngest son, Swift Deer, accepted a piece with a nod. "Good bread," he said, after tasting it. From his own pack, he produced dried meat and wild berries, sharing them in return as they ate together. The barriers between their different worlds seemed to soften. These men might pray differently than he did, Ephraim reflected, but they understood honor and justice as clearly as any preacher he had known. The meal finished, Ephraim felt the weight of unspoken words pressing on his heart. He cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "I must speak plain," he said, meeting Running Fox's steady gaze. "My beliefs forbid me to take life, even to save one eye." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "One I care deeply about. I will not kill, even to rescue Marisol." The Apache men listened without interruption, their faces showing neither judgment nor surprise. When Ephraim continued, his voice grew stronger. "But I have the truth here." He patted his coat where the water right certificate lay secure. The cattle boss stole this land through lies. The law will hear us, all of us. Together, we can stop him without bloodshed. Running Fox was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then he spoke, his words measured and clear. There is wisdom in your path. A warrior knows many ways to fight. Sometimes the strongest battle is won without drawing a blade. His sons nodded in agreement, and Ephraim felt tension he had not known he carried release from his shoulders. These men, skilled in warfare, were choosing to honor his peaceful way. We will protect without killing, Running Fox continued. There are ways to stop evil men that leave them breathing, but wiser. A slight smile touched his weathered face. Perhaps your God and our spirits work together in this, they resumed. Their journey as afternoon shadows lengthened across the land. The scouts led them on paths that avoided the main trails, where the cattle boss's men might be watching. As darkness approached, they made camp in a sheltered hollow where their fires would not be seen from a distance. The night settled around them like a blanket, stars appearing one by one in the vast desert sky. After their simple supper, Ephraim knelt beside his bedroll. The others grew quiet as his clear voice rose in prayer. Lord, we thank you for bringing us together in this cause, he prayed, his words carrying on the evening breeze. Though we come from different paths, you have given us strength through unity. Guide our hearts toward justice without hatred and help us protect the innocent without becoming what we fight against. Running Fox added something soft in Apache, and his sons murmured in response. Though Ephraim did not understand the words, he felt their meaning in his heart, a shared hope for protection and guidance. The campfires burned low, casting warm light on this circle of unlikely allies. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, under the vast desert sky, they had found common ground in their quest for justice. As Ephraim settled into his bedroll, he heard the distant call of a coyote, a reminder that in this wild land, God's presence took many forms, all working together in ways he was only beginning to understand. The sun blazed overhead, casting hard shadows across the cattle boss's sprawling ranch. Ephraim led his group down the main road, dust rising beneath their horses' hooves. Running Fox and his sons flanked them like silent guardians, while the townsman, the preacher, schoolteacher, and blacksmith rode steady behind. Through the heat waves, they saw Mary Saul first. She stood on the ranch house porch, her wrists bound with heavy chains. The cattle boss lounged in a wooden chair beside her, a rifle across his knees. His men clustered nearby, hands hovering near their guns. Ephraim drew his horse to a stop in the yard. His plain black hat and simple clothes stood in stark contrast to the boss's flashy vest and silver-trimmed boots. The silence stretched tight. As a bowstring, well, if it ain't the praying man, the cattle boss drawled, rising slowly. Come to sing hymns at us. His men chuckled, but their laughter died as they noticed the Apache warriors spreading out in a careful circle, hoofbeats. Approached from the east. Sheriff Brooks rode in with several deputies, followed by a stream of townsfolk in wagons and on horseback. Word had spread fast about the confrontation brewing. Quite a crowd you've drawn, Miller, the boss said, his smile turning cruel. He yanked Mary Saul's chains, making her stumble forward. Come to watch you break your precious vows of peace. Ephraim dismounted carefully, his movements deliberate and calm. No man needs to be harmed today, he said, his voice carrying across the yard. Truth speaks louder than violence. Truth. The boss spat in the dust. Truth is, I own this valley. Truth is this Mexican witch has no right to be here. And truth is, you're too weak to do anything about it. Ephraim reached slowly into his coat. The boss's men tensed, but instead of a weapon, he withdrew a folded document. The paper looked small against the vast sky, but it carried the weight of justice. "This is truth," Ephraim said, unfolding the certificate. His clear voice rang out as he read, "By authority of the United States Army. Water rights to Bear Creek Valley are hereby granted to Scout Joseph Whitehawk and his heirs in recognition." A faithful service, a murmur rippled through the crowd. The cattle boss's face darkened like an approaching storm. "Joseph Whitehawk was my husband," Marisol said, lifting her chin despite her chains. "He died serving the army that gave him these rights, rights you tried to steal." Sheriff Brooks pushed his horse forward, hand extended. "Let me see that paper, Miller." Ephraim passed it over. The sheriff studied it carefully, turning it in the sunlight. "This seal is genuine," he announced. "Army registry stamp, signed by the territorial governor himself. It's a lie." The cattle boss roared. He shoved Marisol aside and lunged toward Ephraim, drawing his pistol. Before he could fire, Running Fox's sons moved like lightning. They caught his arms while townsmen rushed forward to help. The blacksmith's huge hands wrapped around the boss's gun, wrenching it away. Within moments, the cattle boss was pinned in the dust, his own men backing away rather than defend him. "You're under arrest," Sheriff Brooks declared, dismounting, "for theft of water rights, assault, kidnapping, and attempting to murder a man in front of witnesses." He pulled out his handcuffs. "Your days of running rough over this county are done." The deputies moved in, securing the boss and his closest men. The remaining ranch hands threw down their guns, seeing the tide had turned. Ephraim hurried to Marisol. With gentle hands, he helped her stand as Running Fox's youngest son worked to unlock her chains. When the last shackle fell away, she collapsed. Into Ephraim's arms, tears streaming down her face. A cheer went up from the crowd. The preacher stepped forward, leading a prayer of thanksgiving. Even those who didn't usually attend church bowed their heads, grateful that justice had come without bloodshed. The sheriff approached Ephraim and Marisol, certificate in hand. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, as the legal heir to these water rights, "you have full authority over this valley's irrigation." "What are your wishes?" Marisol straightened, wiping her eyes. She looked at Ephraim, then at the gathered townspeople. "The water belongs to all who work the land in peace," she said clearly. "We will share it fairly, as neighbors should." Another cheer rose up, louder than before. The cattle boss was led away, his empire of intimidation crumbling like sand. In its place, something stronger was already growing. A community united by justice and mercy. Ephraim held Marisol close, his heart full. His faith in peaceful resolution had been tested but not broken. Through trust in God's law and the strength of community, they had overcome violence without dealing in it. As the crowd celebrated around them, he offered a silent prayer of gratitude. For this victory of truth over force, spring sunlight danced through new window panes as hammers rang out across the Miller farm. Dozens of neighbors had gathered to raise the new barn, its fresh-cut beams stretching toward heaven. The old structure's ashes had been cleared away, leaving only memories of that dark night. Men called instructions back and forth as they worked, while women laid out picnic blankets laden with fresh bread and preserves. Children darted between the adults' legs, their laughter mixing with the sound of construction. Young wheat shoots pushed through dark soil in neat rows, painting the fields with hope's tender green. Marisol moved among the women with easy grace, her shoulders straight and head held high. No longer did she shrink from others' gazes. She taught Anna's youngest daughter a Spanish verse while helping to stitch a quilt square, her voice clear and sweet in the spring air. Like this, she demonstrated, guiding small fingers through the pattern. "My mother taught me these stitches when I was your age." From his place, helping to hoist roof beams, Ephraim paused to watch her. Something warm bloomed in his chest at the sight of her contentment. She belonged here, he realized, not as someone to be protected, but as someone who made their home complete. That evening, after the neighbors had gone home and Anna had put the children to bed, the three adults gathered around the kitchen table. Steam rose from cups of mint tea as crickets chirped outside. Lamplight caught the silver threading through Anna's hair as she darned socks. While Marisol sorted dried herbs into neat bundles, Ephraim cleared his throat softly. "Marisol," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "These past months you've brought life back to this house." The children smile more. Anna sings again. He glanced at his sister-in-law, who nodded encouragingly. "You've shown us strength and grace through trials," he continued. "And he paused, gathering courage. "I would be honored if you would stay, not as our guest, but as my wife." As true? Family tears welled in Marisol's dark eyes. She pressed her hands to her heart, looking between Ephraim and Anna. "You want me to stay? Forever?" "Forever," Ephraim confirmed softly. "If you'll have us." "Yes," Marisol whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, I will stay." She reached across the table to grasp Ephraim's weathered hand. "This is home now. You are my family." Anna wiped her own eyes with her apron, smiling as she watched love bloom in the lamplight's warm glow. The wedding day dawned with ribbons of pink and gold stretching across the sky. Dew sparkled on meadow grass by the creek, where neighbors gathered with quiet joy. Fresh-cut wildflowers adorned rough-hewn benches, their sweet scent mingling with morning air. Ephraim stood tall in his simple Amish black suit, his hands steady as he straightened his collar. His eyes never left the path where Marisol would appear. When she emerged from behind the willows, his breath caught. She wore a dress that spoke of two worlds joined as one. Anna's careful stitching had captured both plain dignity and the vibrant spirit of Apache artistry. Delicate embroidery bloomed across the bodice in patterns that told stories of earth and sky. The preacher welcomed all in a clear voice that carried across the meadow. Children perched on fence rails, their faces bright with wonder. As Ephraim and Marisol joined hands beneath the open sky, their fingers intertwined like roots seeking soil. "Love knows no boundaries," the preacher declared, binding their hands with a white ribbon. "What God has joined, let no man separate." Young voices rose in song, sweet and pure as morning light. Neighbors who had once turned away now cheered. As the couple kissed, Marisol's Apache kin stepped forward, offering traditional blessings in ancient words that seemed to make the very creek pause its flowing. As evening painted the sky in purple and gold, Ephraim led his bride through wheat fields that rippled like waves in the sunset. Their footsteps matched as they walked between the tall stalks. He turned to her, his voice soft with emotion. "You've already given us more than sons," he said, squeezing her hand. "You've given us hope." Together they walked toward home, where lanterns gleamed from the new barn's windows like earthbound stars. Their shadows merged into one as they crossed the threshold, stepping into their shared future. Thanks for watching. Stories like this shape us in ways we don't always expect. If something resonated, subscribe. I'm back tomorrow with another one worth hearing.